it was a mess, and you never knew what was going to be around another corner. At one point, there was great confusion about where we were going.
Wow.
So I first ended up going to a cafeteria with a handful of other members. That was not the right location. There was no one there to secure that cafeteria, by the way. We eventually made it to the right location where approximately 200 members of Congress and some staff persons were located in that more secure facility. There were various moments throughout the day where things could have been very deadly for us.
Representative Jones, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Great. Well, we're going to start with what everyone's thinking about right now, impeachment. So it's almost January 20th. The clock is ticking. I know why I think impeachment is still worth pursuing, but why do you think this is an important step to take?
Were Congress to do nothing in response to the attempted overthrow of the federal government, the violent insurrection that we saw on Wednesday, we would be abdicating our constitutional responsibility to be a check on the executive branch. We would be signaling to Donald Trump and those who would like to be like him, people who maybe want to run for president or for Congress, or domestic terrorists who think that they can successfully emulate, maybe with more success, what was attempted last Wednesday. We would be emboldening those people were they to see that there were no consequences in response to what happened. And I have not lost hope that enough Republican senators will vote to convict in the event that it goes to a trial, which I expect it will, after the House impeaches this president.
Second time would be the charm on that one. And in terms of the timing of this, this is obviously early, but we heard Congressman Clyburn say on Sunday that the House, could impeach this week and then potentially wait to send those articles to the Senate for up to a few months so that the proceedings don't get in the way of Biden's agenda in that first crucial 100 days. What do you make of that idea?
Well, that idea has not been socialized. I read it through public reporting, and so as a member of the Democratic House leadership team, I certainly look forward to being part of those conversations. And I know that I speak on behalf of the entire Democratic caucus when I say that we would like that idea presented to us directly for our discussion. I happen to think that we should not wait after impeaching this president 100 days to the point made by my colleague from New York, Congresswoman AOC. I think that the timing of confirmations after nominations can wait a few days until such time as we are able to finish the trial in the Senate. And I'm hopeful that he will be convicted and that a vote will then be taken to permanently ban him from running for federal office moving forward.
So you and other Congress members like Representative Cori Bush are seeking to investigate and sanction or even remove GOP lawmakers who have been fanning the flames of the deadly coup attempt on the Capitol by trying to sell the voter fraud conspiracy for months and months. Now they want to wave that memory stick from Men in Black and call for unity without accountability. So can you talk about why it's an important part of this, and is that effort gaining traction?
Perhaps the biggest contributor to the events of last Wednesday is the sentiment that folks in power can get away with it, specifically Donald Trump and approximately 140 Republican members of the House, all of whom voted against the certification of Pennsylvania's electoral votes, can escape without consequence even a violent insurrection like what we saw on Wednesday, January 6th. And so if we were to not somehow sanction those members who directly were engaged in the incitement of that attempted coup, then we would just embolden them to continue to act in a destructive, un-American, very dangerous way moving forward into the 117th Congress. I mean, it is beyond the pale that anyone who has sworn an oath to protect the United States of America from enemies, both foreign and domestic, would then be allowed to continue serving after participating in this myth, this malicious lie about the election having been stolen from Donald Trump and the need to take back the government, which is what these people believe, and it's what their Republican representatives are pushing.
Yeah. And we're even pushing, as they were, counting the electoral votes and all of their objections. They didn't stop pushing that. So, yeah, it's a very good point.
Yeah, and you saw Peter Meyer, who has replaced Justin Amash from Michigan, pen an op-ed in what I believe was the Detroit Free Press, talking about how on the House floor, he spoke with a Republican colleague who clearly was conflicted about how to vote with respect to the certification of the Electoral College votes, and that member only voted to object because the member was afraid for that member's family's safety. And so on one hand, I feel for anyone who's in that environment. That is an abusive environment. Make no mistake about it. At the same time, don't be part of a party that would hold you hostage. That is not public service. You have a constitutional oath that you've taken, a constitutional duty that you have to fulfill. And, why are we even in this business of public service if not to do right by the American people and to take care that all laws are faithfully executed?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's the fundamental question. And then in addition to sort of the accountability measures that can come from Congress, how important is it to you that this incoming DOJ prioritizes an investigation or just maybe further charges of everything that occurred, even as the new administration, again, might want to move on to other things, might want to, have their opportunity to exercise the will of the people that voted them in there?
Well, I expect Merrick Garland to do his job as Attorney General. And that means you prosecute violations of federal law without fear or favor. And certainly you are not inoculated from being prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law simply because you've previously held elected office at the federal level. There is an abundant amount of crimes that have been committed, both federal and state, by this impeached president and by his cabinet officials and other members of his administration. And I dare say members of the United States Congress, including both the House and the Senate. And so my expectation is that these people will be investigated by an attorney general who is not partisan, unlike Bill Barr, and who will look at the facts, look at the law, and make the appropriate application of the law to the facts.
Yeah, that's right. And, the Department of Homeland Security deemed white supremacists the deadliest domestic terror threat in a report last year. They've also been warning about it for more than a decade. And we saw more evidence on display last week in D.C., just like we saw it with the plot to kidnap Michigan's Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer. So when are they going to do something about it? Do you know of any plans to actually address this issue?
I certainly want Congress to hold hearings on the infiltration of white nationalists into law enforcement agencies all across this country, not just the Capitol Police.
Right.
Let me say, just to be clear, that most of those Capitol Police officers behave valiantly in protecting the lives of people like myself and my colleagues. I happen to be one of the approximately 200 members of Congress and staff who were locked inside the House chamber and were evacuated just minutes before that chamber was overtaken by that violent mob. And so I'm very grateful to the security personnel for helping to save our lives. We also have to make sure that we have an attorney general who cares about the rule of law. And that's actually something that will be transformative in just a few days when Merrick Garland is nominated and confirmed to head that agency. I'm a DOJ alumnus, and my goodness, we just used to take things for granted, I guess, that there would be no political interference, for example, in prosecutions, that we wouldn't try to gut agencies and divisions within DOJ, that we wouldn't fire inspectors general because we didn't like their conclusions, and that we wouldn't prosecute political opponents. All of those norms were eviscerated. And without any active, any legislative action, it will be transformative to have a new Attorney General of the United States. And I still look forward to that. And I want other people to look forward to it as well.
And you mentioned, Congressman, just talking about what actually occurred. So can you actually talk a little bit about your experience on Wednesday during all of this? What was going through your head? Can you take us through what happened? It's quite a way to embark on a new job that you've taken on.
It was day 4. most
Jeez.
most people would quit a job where on day 4 they almost lost their life.
Yeah. I've quit jobs for less, you know? When Applebee's was like, you got to work all these microwaves, I'm like, I'm good. That was one day. I didn't even have my life in jeopardy. So, yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate that anecdote because it is one of the few things that have made me laugh and smile over the past several days. So I'm on the House floor, sitting with the Democratic leadership team. Fortunate that my colleagues elected me freshman representative leadership, and so the Speaker invited me to sit down on the House floor for what was supposed to be a routine exercise, the certification of a presidential election. It should have gone without a hiccup, but instead, President Trump and approximately 140 Republicans in the House and in the Senate. And eventually I start getting these text messages during debate. And the text messages are describing the evacuation of various legislative office buildings. And eventually there is an announcement from one of the security officers in the House chamber where we were located. And there were approximately 200 of us. Those who were not on the House floor, which is the ground level, were in the gallery overlooking the House floor. Mm-hmm. And the announcement said that the Capitol had been overtaken by these domestic terrorists, and that they needed to lock down the House chamber from the inside. They had to secure all the doors. Then we were told to look under our chairs for gas masks in the event that tear gas needed to be used. We were also told that it was possible we would have to lie down on the ground in the event of gunfire. Minutes later, there is a very loud banging sound at one of the doors behind me. And that was extraordinary because anyone who has ever been to the House chamber knows that there is security posted at every single entrance to only allow members of the House and their staff persons onto the House floor. Mm-hmm. And so that meant that there was no one protecting us from on the outside of that door, which has historically been the case. And so then I look around the interior of the House chamber, and there's only a sprinkling of law enforcement agents there to protect approximately 200 people from what it turned out, I wasn't aware of this at the time, were dozens of domestic terrorists on the other side of that door. Yeah. And so thankfully, we were evacuated. They had immediately evacuated the Speaker. I mean, I didn't even see her leave. They just so quickly evacuated her, and the Majority Leader, Chairman Hakeem Jeffrey, stayed behind with us, and we were evacuated outside of the House chamber, past barricaded doors. The visual is just wild. I mean, there were like 15 to 20 chairs just stacked against and tables just stacked against one of the other entrances as we were passing by down through the tunnels to get to another more secure location. You have members who, weren't able to move as quickly as others. I mean, it was a mess. It was a mess, and you never knew what was going to be around another corner. At one point, there was great confusion about where we were going. Wow. So I first ended up going to a cafeteria with a handful of other members. That was not the right location. There was no one there to secure that cafeteria, by the way. We eventually made it to the right location where approximately 200 members of Congress and some staff persons were located in that more secure facility. There were various moments throughout the day where things could have been very deadly for us.
When you watch the video back, I mean, have you seen any of the videos since? Have you subjected yourself to sort of what was happening on the outside, and what's it like comparing it to what you were experiencing on the inside? Like, is it worse now, knowing how much, how dangerous it could have become?
It is much worse now because I had no idea that there were that many people who had breached security and made it into the Capitol building. again, just very grateful to the Capitol police officers who have suffered bodily harm and death defending us. I mean, it should never have happened, and it was completely avoidable. And there must be accountability from a security standpoint, because, as I'm sure you've seen by now, there is significant evidence that at least some Capitol police officers were helping these domestic terrorists gain entry into the Capitol building. And, when you listen to Majority Whip Jim Clyburn talk about how they made it into his obscurely located third floor office, skipping over the first floor ceremonial, more conspicuously located office, it is just the latest piece of evidence that there were people who were giving them the inside scoop on where to go and how to get through the Capitol. I mean, there are members of Congress, myself included, who couldn't tell you how to get to Jim Clyburn's third floor office. They had a very specific purpose of doing harm to people like Jim Clyburn and to Speaker Pelosi. Speaker Pelosi tells a story about how her staff were literally hiding under desks with doors locked, and how they could hear those domestic terrorists walking by looking for the speaker. It's been publicly reported that these domestic terrorists wanted to do harm to the speaker and to the vice president, Donald Trump's own vice president, who apparently he hasn't called yet since Wednesday. And so I think the intent is clear, that the intent was to do harm and to prevent the peaceful transfer of power. This, more than anything, is about democracy. Let's talk about how this started. It started with a lie about the presidential election. It started with a lie that the election was somehow being stolen from Donald Trump without any evidence to support that claim.
Right.
And it harkens back to 2008, when people said that Barack Obama was an illegitimate president, and that there must have been voter fraud. This is what Republicans said, in order for him to have been elected. And what followed was a decade of racist voter ID laws, the closure of polling locations, and other means of suppressing largely Black and brown voters from exercising their constitutional right. And I don't think it's any coincidence that the day after that resounding victory for Democrats in the Georgia Senate runoffs, you saw a proposal to make it tougher for people to vote in Georgia. This was never about addressing voter fraud. It was always about laying the foundation through this myth to then make it tougher for certain segments of the American population to be able to exercise their right. It's why I'm so looking forward to passing H.R. 1, the For the People Act, which contains a critical set of democracy reforms, including automatic voter registration, which would enfranchise an additional 50 million people nationally. It would end partisan gerrymandering of congressional districts, so that people who are QAnon adherents cannot win general election contests after prevailing in their primaries. Through a system of public financing of congressional elections, which is another key provision of H.R. 1, you would get better people in Congress, folks who won't debate the need for a $2,000 stimulus check, and who go there to represent the American people, not large corporations and the super rich. That has been the project, and that is what they were doing on January 6th through this lie. The project of the Republican Party is, because they cannot compete on the merits through their ideas, it is to disenfranchise Black and brown people in this country, including in Georgia. When they talk about voter fraud, they're not talking about white people who voted.
Right? Yeah, they're never trying to limit voting rights the moment that Donald Trump gets elected. It's always anybody else who's not a Republican.
Right. The members in Georgia are not questioning their own elections in their various congressional districts.
Right.
They're just pissed that Black and brown people have been coming out in droves to restore democracy and some sanity in government.
Yeah, and that's a huge priority for this Congress, and really glad that you're talking about it and focusing on it. I want to ask one other thing. I know you're probably short on time, but on Sunday, the attending physician to Congress said that there could have been possible COVID exposure while lawmakers were grouped together for safety during all of those moments on the 6th. What is your response to that? And have you gotten any further guidance on what the hell is going on there?
When the approximately 200 of us were evacuated from the House chamber to that more secure location, we had to stay there for at least 3 hours as security forces confirmed that all people who had breached security had been ejected from the premises. And in that time, a large number of Republicans did what they have often done in various settings related to their job here, which is refuse to wear masks. And their staff do the same thing, by the way.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that members of the Republican caucus have died from COVID exposure and have otherwise contracted COVID-19. I mean, it was just so disrespectful. And I watched as my colleague, Lisa Blunt Rochester, there's now footage of her going up to people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and others, offering them masks. They declined her offer and they scoffed. Mm-hmm. They scoffed. I mean, regardless of whether you want to wear a mask or not, why not just be respectful of the fact that there are about 200 other folks in this one room,
right,
in close proximity to you, who could be harmed, including people who had pre-existing conditions.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's just, the self-entitlement for me. It's a little ridiculous at this point.
Well, thank you so much again, Congressman, for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Happy to participate and happy to be back in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much. Please stay safe.
Thank you.